Hi, I'm Larry Dignan here with Ravi Kumar. He is president of Infosys, and we're going to talk about the future of education and where things are going and kind of what we've learned from being remote so far. Hi, Ravi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Larry, for this opportunity to talk to you.
So I guess let's just start at the top. What's Infosys working on now in terms of, higher ed and sort of what are you seeing across the scale in terms of engagement and how things are going as we're all remote?
So, Larry, as you're aware, the tech and digital services sector has continued to accelerate during the middle of the health crisis, ironically. And we are doubling down on continuing to keep the mission critical businesses live and kicking. So in some sense, we are digital responders to first responder businesses. Higher education for Infosys has always been a sweet spot because we are a company which deeply believed in lifelong learning and investing on education, because we build a huge pipe of talent from schools and colleges across the world. And in recent times in the US, in the last 2 years, we hired almost 13,000 from in the local US markets, of which almost 4,000 we hired from schools and colleges.
So what are you seeing in terms of, how things have gone so far with remote? And I mean, it was basically set up as sort of business continuity in a lot of ways. How do you see things right now and how they've developed?
So Larry, this is a tectonic shift. I would call this acceleration of digitization more than anything else. Whatever was happening in the last few years has kind of got accelerated in the last 6 months or so. And in some ways, the health crisis has become an inflection point. And I'm going to talk about a few things on why this is an inflection point for education. First and foremost, even before the health crisis, there was a rapid digitization in workplaces. Digital landscapes were the future for enterprises. And as that happened, we realized that the half-life of skills has shrunk significantly. So education and work were kind of intertwined. And that acceleration is actually now, it's kind of now moving at a rapid pace. It's an exponential curve. So as that happens, educators educating and employers giving work, and these two distinctive categories have blurred. What that really means is educators have to work with enterprises to create talent pools for work. Work and education has kind of got blurred. And this is in line with what the digital revolution is. The industrial revolution had a linear problem, I would say, because in the industrial revolution, you needed educators to educate and employers to work. The digital revolution, because of the speed and the exponential curve at which it is getting embraced, you need those lines to blur. So educators are partnering with enterprises like Infosys to define the future. And that is what the future of higher education would be. You are going to find educators actually working in conjunction with large employers like us to create pathways for the future, and therefore deal with the hybrid world we are all going to work on. Work by itself is also getting democratized. Work is moving away from rich urban settings to a very diversified, democratized world. And that means work is going to be delivered in a variety of ways, in a virtual way, which essentially means we are going to shift, and there is an inflection point to shift from degrees to skills. And as that shift happens, educators have to actually build experiential learning in courses they actually deliver. So that's broadly where education is going to. I would add one last point. Education is going to be micro learning on mega platforms. What that really means is there would be mega platforms and there would be micro learning in a stackable way, because education is, the life of skills is shrinking. So companies like Infosys are building platforms which will help this shift and this transition to this new future of education, as I call it.
So what do you think that means for the structure of education today? Like right now, I mean, I look at higher ed and, I'd argue the core competency is charging rent, right? You go there, it's a 4-year degree packaged up, you get this social experience or whatever. Does that structure hold up over time?
It would. This started. It started even before the health crisis. The health crisis is only going to accelerate that process. I would believe that lifelong learning has to be built in K-12 schools, and then all your life you're going to learn to unlearn, learn to relearn, and that process will be a partnership between educational institutions and enterprises who will take the joint responsibility of creating those learning opportunities. So educators will create these pathways along with large enterprises. Imagine Infosys actually, working with a university to build a course on cybersecurity, or build a course on design, or build a course on digital skills. And a part of that learning will be academic, a part of that learning will be experiential. In many ways, the manufacturing industry did apprenticeship programs all over the world to create future talent pools. Digital capabilities will have to be built in the same way, and Infosys is building these exceptionally good apprentice programs where you learn, earn, and work together. And in conjunction with universities, we are building those partnerships. So that's where we're headed to. So you're going to see a switch from universities catering to learners to universities catering to enterprises, which in turn cater to learners. So it is a shift from B2C to B2B, as I call it. And in many ways, degrees are going to be juxtaposed with skills. So skills are going to be equally important. So that inflection point, in my view, is a great pivot for the future, because it would increase diversity and inclusivity in workplaces. Remember, education has become very, very expensive. In the last 20 years, education has jumped by 150% in the United States in terms of cost, while cost of inflation is only 50% in the last 20 years. So it has created a divide, and I think we have this opportunity to bridge the divide by making that pivot to skills. So these learning platforms which we are building, and what we announced with Arizona State University a few weeks ago, to what we are announcing with other universities and actually other enterprises as well, using our platform called the Live Enterprise for Education, is very crucial. It's very crucial because we not only go to the hybrid world, we also go to a world where education is a joint responsibility of enterprises and academic institutions. And this platform is a platform which is not just delivering content, but it's also delivering engagement with students of the future. And students of the future are not just students in universities. Students of the future are also enterprise employees who are getting reskilled on a constant basis. So we are building this very immersive platform, which is a combination of engagement, combination of the life cycle of a learner, to empowering the learners in a value chain, and also taking some of the pre-existing university courseware and embedding it into the journey of the future. Our foundation, Larry, which is the Infosys Foundation USA, focuses on K-12 schools. We strongly believe that the lifelong learning has to start in K-12 schools. So we are one of the largest foundations focused on K-12 schools and teachers in K-12 schools. We have to get the teachers right first. If the teachers can deal with a hybrid world, they can deal with experiential learning, and they can deal with partnership with enterprises, we will solve this issue. So we are actually taking it to teachers, and we have a platform for bringing teachers on this digital, in a digital virtual way, and teaching them how to teach and equipping them for the future of hybrid learning.
What would you say is missing from a technology perspective right now? Like I know things like labs are very hard to do right now. Um, from a remote perspective, I guess what needs to be there technology wise to really make this experience different?
So the future of technology has to be digital, immersive, and hybrid. It's a combination of all three of them: digital, immersive, and hybrid. And it is a combination of all players in the value chain, depending on whether you're going to a higher ed school or you're actually going to a K-12 school, starting from students, parents, teachers, administrators, and the school ecosystem. So technology has to create a immersive experience across that value chain. And more importantly, it needs to be accommodated for synchronous and asynchronous learning. And it has to be accommodated for micro modularizing content so that you could make it stackable enough. All these components are there in some form and technology enables it, but you have to bring all these pieces together to make it exhaustive and comprehensive enough to deal with a hybrid future. We are not going to be in a remote world for all forever. We know that we are going to get out of this current situation to a future. When we get to the future, we have this opportunity to pivot back to the past or pivot to a good future, pivot to a brighter future. And technology can be that enabler. And in a hybrid future, you take the best of both worlds. You take the best of the physical world of schools, you take the virtual world and you bring it together and you make it a lifelong learning paradigm. You're going to solve it. So technology is there. It just has to be got together into these platforms. And what we're doing at Infosys is also kind of a opportunity to build that mega platform, which we believe is going to be the future. Education and healthcare are going to be the next big opportunities for platformization. And I think universities and edtech companies are going to play a big role in that process.
What has to happen culturally to make this work?
So culturally, there are a bunch of things, right? How do you make sure that you create the same level of engagement in a hybrid world? How do you build social capital? Remember, we are all very productive now because we are drawing from the social capital of the past. We all worked in workplaces where we knew people and we're drawing from that social capital. We can only draw it to some extent. How do you build social capital in a virtual world? I think that is what we need to build on. The third piece I would say is trust. Trust is an important factor. We all believe that, trust in workplaces, trust in education, trust between students and teachers, which was built in physical spaces. How do you build them virtually? Not just because of technological tools, but also a cultural mindset of trust. How do you create engagement, which is going to help you to keep it immersive enough, even if you're in a hybrid world? These are the cultural nuances we're all going to deal with as we go to the other side of the crisis. We're all used to brainstorming in groups. How do we change the process of brainstorming or design thinking, as we call in the corporate world? How do we make it much more effective, where you ideate when you are in an isolated mode, but you brainstorm when you bring it to a team, which is different to how we delivered work in workplaces. Ideation was always done with a group of people. Now, how are you going to do this in a hybrid world where ideation could potentially be in an isolated way, but iteratively moving it to the finishing line could be a very collaborative way, and therefore you bring the best of the physical and virtual worlds. So cultural nuances of this kind are going to be very important. Micromanaging versus macro managing. We all lived in a world which was micromanaged. How do we make it macro managed? Because we're potentially not going to be having the same level of physical connection as much as we had in the past. So these are a bunch of things we need to work on. One of the other interesting conversations which is happening is, do we need hierarchical structures or network structures for the future to be more effective? network structures, lend by itself to more agility and lend by itself to a hybrid model versus hierarchical structures which were very well defined for physical workplaces. So all of these are learnings which have to be embedded into educational platforms and embedded into K-12 schools if we want to get to the other side with a higher productivity and a better and a better future.
So, as an enterprise that hires thousands of people a quarter, what does the hybrid education model mean in terms of recruitment?
Larry, that's a great question. Actually, we're doing a few things. One is in the spirit of everything I said. I want to let you know that we experiment with all these things at Infosys even before we call it a trend or call it something which can be scaled. So we are one of the first companies which is pioneering hiring from community colleges and hiring from communities without any degrees. Hiring without degrees into a learning mechanism for a couple of weeks, and then after that process, putting them into an apprenticeship and creating digital talent for the future. So that's a big shift we are making. We're making a shift. Not that we're going to ignore degrees. We're going to continue to hire with degrees, but we're also going to hire for skills, and we're going to place them in the same we're going to view them in the same lens. The second change we are making, and that's a big shift, is over the last 8 to 9 months, we hired from schools and colleges. We also hired from the markets, and we did that virtually. And we made sure that we backward integrated everything we did into the last few trimesters of our undergrad schools, which essentially means you could use our learning platforms way before you join Infosys and be ready as you get in there. So we've done that very effectively. The third thing I would believe which will happen is, and this is potentially going to be real, is workplaces are going to become in the future not just a place for solving problems, but also a place for finding new problems, because machines are going to take over solving problems. So we as a company are, which historically hired STEM graduates and STEM undergraduates, we are hiring people without a STEM degree. We are hiring people from liberal arts, we are hiring people with a design background, and we're of course hiring people from community colleges as well, and creating a pipe for apprenticeships so that they could actually learn, earn, and work with us. The Arizona State University has partnered with Infosys to help us on credits as they work with us. So somebody coming from a community college who has an associate degree, if they choose to do a degree, we don't want it, but if they choose to do a degree, they could actually do an undergrad degree working with us. And they could earn those credits as they're experientially learning with us. So we're landing them on a backbone job, digital backbone job, and we are transitioning them into a core job as they work with us. So these are a variety of things we are excited about as we reset ourselves for a future which is going to be very different for education.
All right, thanks for joining us.